He tried to decide whether the woman was pretty. Another thing he'd laid in when he'd committed himself to one last marijuana vacation was petroleum jelly. When he smoked marijuana, he tended to masturbate a great deal, whether or not there were opportunities for intercourse, opting when he smoked for masturbation over intercourse, and the petroleum jelly kept him from returning to normal function, all tender and sore. He was also hesitant to get up and check the color of his bong because he would have to pass right by the telephone console to get to the kitchen, and he didn't want to be tempted to call the woman who said she would come again because he felt creepy about bothering her about something he'd represented as so casual, and was afraid that several audio hang-ups on her answering device would look even creepier. And also he felt anxious about tying up the line at just the moment when she called, as she certainly would. He decided to get call waiting added to his audio phone service for a nominal extra charge. Then remembered that since this was positively the last time he would or even could indulge what Randy with an I had called an addiction, every bit as rapacious as pure alcoholism, there would be no real need for call waiting, since a situation like the present one could never arise again. This line of thinking almost caused him to become angry. To ensure the composure with which he sat waiting in light in his chair, he focused his senses on his surroundings. No part of the insect he'd seen was now visible. The clicks of his portable clock were really composed of 3 smaller clicks, signifying, he supposed, preparation, movement, and readjustment. He began to grow disgusted with himself for waiting so anxiously for the promised arrival of something that had stopped being fun anyway. He didn't even know why he liked it anymore. It made his mouth dry, and his eyes dry and red, and his face sag. And he hated it when his face sagged. It was as if all the integrity of all the muscles in his face was eroded by marijuana. And he got terribly self-conscious about the fact that his face was sagging, and had long ago forbidden himself to smoke dope around anyone else. He didn't even know what its draw was anymore. He couldn't even be around anyone else if he'd smoked marijuana that same day. It made him so self-conscious. And the dope often gave him a painful case of pleurisy if he smoked it for more than 2 straight days of heavy, continuous smoking in front of the interlaced viewer in his bedroom. It made his thoughts jut out crazily in jagged directions and made him stare raptly like an unbright child at entertainment cartridges. When he laid in film cartridges for a vacation with marijuana, he favored cartridges in which a lot of things blew up and crashed into each other, which he was sure an unpleasant fact specialist like Randy would point out had implications that were not good. He pulled his necktie down smooth while he gathered his intellect, will, self-knowledge, and conviction, and determined that when this latest woman came, as she surely would, this would simply be his very last marijuana debauch. He'd simply smoke so much, so fast, that it would be so unpleasant, and the memory of it so repulsive, that once he'd consumed it and gotten it out of his home and his life as quickly as possible, he would never want to do it again. He would make it his business to create a really bad set of debauched associations with the stuff in his memory. The dope scared him. It made him afraid. It wasn't that he was afraid of the dope, it was that smoking it made him afraid of everything else. It had long since stopped being a release, or relief, or fun. This last time, he would smoke the whole 200 grams, 120 grams cleaned, destemmed, in 4 days, over an ounce a day, all in tight, heavy, economical one-hitters off a quality virgin bong, an incredible, insane amount per day. He'd make it a mission, treating it like a penance and behavior modification regimen all at once. He'd smoke his way through 30 high-grade grams a day, starting the moment he woke up, and used ice water to detach his tongue from the roof of his mouth and took an antacid, averaging out to 200 or 300 heavy bong hits per day, an insane and deliberately unpleasant amount, and he'd make it a mission to smoke it continuously. Even though if the marijuana was as good as the woman claimed, he'd do 5 hits and then not want to take the trouble to load and one hit any more for at least an hour.
I read this part.
But he would force himself to do it anyway. He would smoke it all, even if he didn't want it. Even if it started to make him dizzy and ill. He would use discipline and persistence and will and make the whole experience so unpleasant, so debased and debauched and unpleasant that his behavior would be henceforward modified. He'd never even want to do it again because the memory of the insane 4 days to come would be so firmly, terribly emblazoned in his memory. He'd cure himself by excess. He predicted that the woman, when she came, might want to smoke some of the 200 grams with him, hang out, hole up, listen to some of his impressive collection of Tito Puente recordings, and probably have intercourse. He had never once had actual intercourse on marijuana. Frankly, the idea repelled him. 2 dry mouths bumping at each other, trying to kiss. His self-conscious thoughts twisting around on themselves like a snake on a stick, while he bucked and snorted dryly above her, his swollen eyes red and his face sagging so that its slack folds may be touched, limply, the folds of her own loose sagging face as it sloshed back and forth on his pillow, its mouth working dryly. The thought was repellent. He decided he'd have her toss him what she'd promised to bring, and then would from a distance toss back to her the $1,250 US in large bills and tell her not to let the door hit her on the butt on the way out. He'd say ass instead of butt. He'd be so rude and unpleasant to her that the memory of his lack of basic decency and of her tight, offended face would be a further disincentive ever in the future to risk calling her and repeating the course of action he had now committed himself to. He had never been so anxious for the arrival of a woman he did not want to see. He remembered clearly the last woman he'd involved in his trying just one more vacation with dope and drawn blinds. The last woman had been something called an appropriation artist, which seemed to mean that she copied and embellished other art and then sold it through a prestigious Marlborough Street gallery. She had an artistic manifesto that involved radical feminist themes. He'd let her give him one of her smaller paintings, which covered half the wall over his bed, and was of a famous film actress whose name he always had a hard time recalling, and a less famous film actor, the two of them entwined in a scene from a well-known old film, a romantic scene, an embrace, copied from a film history textbook, and much enlarged and made stilted, and with obscenities scrawled all over it in bright red letters.
1.
The last woman had been sexy but not pretty, as the woman he now didn't want to see but was still waiting anxiously for was pretty in a faded, withered Cambridge way that made her seem pretty but not sexy. The appropriation artist had been led to believe that he was a former speed addict. Intravenous addiction to methamphetamine hydrochloride is what he remembered telling that one. He had even described the awful taste of hydrochloride in the addict's mouth immediately after injection. He had researched the subject carefully. She had been further led to believe that marijuana kept him from using the drug with which he really had a problem, and so that if he seemed anxious to get some once she'd offered to get him some, it was only because he was heroically holding out against much darker, deeper, more addictive urges, and he needed her to help him. He couldn't quite remember when or how she'd been given all these impressions. He had not sat down and outright bold-faced lied to her. It had been more of an impression he'd conveyed and nurtured and allowed to gather its own life and force. The insect was now entirely visible. It was on the shelf that held his digital equalizer. The insect might never actually have retreated all the way back into the hole in the shelf's girder. What looked like its reemergence might just have been a change in his attention, or the two windows' light, or the visual context of his surroundings. The girder protruded from the wall and was a triangle of dull steel with holes for shelves to fit into. The metal shelves that held his audio equipment were painted a dark industrial green and were originally made for holding canned goods. They were designed to be extra kitchen shelves. The insect sat inside its dark, shiny case with an immobility that seemed like the gathering of a force. It sat like the hull of a vehicle from which the engine had been, for the moment, removed. It was dark and had a shiny case and antennae that protruded but did not move. He had to use a bathroom. His last piece of contact from the appropriation artist with whom he had had intercourse, and who during intercourse had sprayed some sort of perfume up into the air from a mister she held in her left hand as she lay beneath him, making a wide variety of sounds and spraying perfume up into the air, so that he felt the cold mist of it settling on his back and shoulders and was chilled and repelled. His last piece of contact after he'd gone into hiding with the marijuana she'd gotten for him had been a card she'd mailed that was a pastiche photo of a doormat of coarse green plastic grass with "Welcome" on it, and next to it a flattering publicity photo of the appropriation artist from her Back Bay gallery, and between them an unequal sign, which was an equal sign with a diagonal slash across it, and also an obscenity he had assumed was directed at him, majusculed in red grease pencil along the bottom, with multiple exclamation points. She had been offended, because he had seen her every day for 10 days. Then, when she'd finally obtained 50 grams of genetically enhanced hydroponic marijuana for him, he had said that she'd saved his life, and he was grateful, and the friends for whom he'd promised to get some were grateful. And she had to go right now because he had an appointment and had to take off, but that he would doubtless be calling her later that day. And they shared a moist kiss, and she had said she could feel his heart pounding right through his suit coat. And she had driven away in her rusty, unmuffled car, and he had gone and moved his own car to an underground garage several blocks away, and had run back and drawn the clean blinds and curtains, and changed the audio message on his answering device to one that described an emergency departure from town, and had drawn and locked his bedroom blinds, and had taken the new rose-colored bong out of its Bogart's bag, and was not seen for 3 days, and ignored over 24 audio messages and protocols and e-notes expressing concern over his message's emergency, and had never contacted her again. He had hoped she would assume he had succumbed again to methamphetamine hydrochloride, and was sparing her the agony of his descent back into the hell of chemical dependence. What it really was that he had again decided those 50 grams of resin-soaked dope, which had been so potent that on the second day it had given him an anxiety attack so paralyzing that he had gone to the bathroom in a Tufts University commemorative ceramic stein to avoid leaving his bedroom, represented his very last debauch ever with dope, and that he had to cut himself off from all possible future sources of temptation and supply. And this surely included the appropriation artist, who would come with the stuff at precisely the time she'd promised, he recalled. From the street outside came the sound of a dumpster being emptied into an EWD land barge. His shame at what she might, on the other hand, perceive as his slimy, phallocentric conduct toward her made it easier for him to avoid her as well. Though not shame, really. More like being uncomfortable at the thought of it. He had had to launder his bedding twice to get the smell of the perfume out. He went into the bathroom to use the bathroom, making it a point to look neither at the insect visible on the shelf to his left, nor at the telephone console on its lacquer workstation to the right. He was committed to touching neither. Where was the woman who had said she'd come? The new bong in the Bogart's bag was orange, meaning he might have misremembered the bong before it as orange. It was a rich, autumnal orange that lightened to more of a citrus orange when its plastic cylinder was held up to the late afternoon light of the window over the kitchen sink. The metal of its stem and bowl was rough stainless steel, the kind with a grain, unpretty and all business. The bong was 1/2 meter tall and had a weighted base covered in soft, false suede. Its orange plastic was thick, and the carb on the side opposite the stem had been raggedly cut so that rough shards of plastic protruded from the little hole, and it might well hurt his thumb when he smoked, which he decided to consider just part of the penance he would undertake after the woman had come and gone. He left the door to the bathroom open so that he would be sure to hear the telephone when it sounded or the buzzer to the front doors of his condominium complex when it sounded. In the bathroom, his throat suddenly closed, and he wept hard for 2 or 3 seconds before the weeping stopped abruptly, and he could not get it to start again. It was now over 4 hours since the time the woman had casually committed to come. He was in the bathroom or in his chair near the window or near his telephone console and the insect and the window that had admitted a strange rectangular bar of light when he began to wait. The light through this window was coming at an angle more and more oblique. Its shadow had become a parallelogram. The light through the southwest window was straight and reddening. He had thought he needed to use the bathroom but was unable to. He tried putting a whole stack of film cartridges into the dock of the disk drive and then turning on the huge teleputer in his bedroom. He could see the piece of appropriation art in the mirror above the TP. He lowered the volume all the way and pointed the remote device at the TP like some sort of weapon. He sat on the edge of his bed with his elbows on his knees and scanned the stack of cartridges. Each cartridge in the dock dropped on command and began to engage the drive with an insectile click and whir, and he scanned it. But he was unable to distract himself with the TP because he was unable to stay with any one entertainment cartridge for more than a few seconds. The moment he recognized what exactly was on one cartridge, he had a strong anxious feeling that there was something more entertaining on another cartridge and that he was potentially missing it. He realized that he would have plenty of time to enjoy all the cartridges, and realized intellectually that the feeling of deprived panic over missing something made no sense. The viewer hung on the wall, half again as large as the piece of feminist art. He scanned cartridges for some time. The telephone console sounded during this interval of anxious scanning. He was up and moving back out toward it before the first ring was completed, flooded with either excitement or relief, the TP's remote device still in his hand, but it was only a friend and colleague calling. And when he heard the voice that was not the woman who had promised to bring what he'd committed the next several days to banishing from his life forever, he was almost sick with disappointment. With a great deal of mistaken adrenaline now shining and ringing in his system, and he got off the line with the colleague to clear the line and keep it available for the woman so fast that he was sure his colleague perceived him as either angry with him or just plain rude. He was further upset at the thought that his answering the telephone this late in the day did not jibe with the emergency message about being unreachable that would be on his answering device if the colleague called back after the woman had come and gone and he'd shut the whole system of his life down, and he was standing over the telephone console trying to decide whether the risk of the colleague or someone else from the agency calling back was sufficient to justify changing the audio message on the answering device to describe an emergency departure this evening instead of this afternoon. But he decided he felt that since the woman had definitely committed to coming, his leaving the message unchanged would be a gesture of fidelity to her commitment, and might somehow, in some oblique way, strengthen that commitment. The EWD land barge was emptying dumpsters all up and down the street. He returned to his chair near the window. The disk drive and TP viewer were still on in his bedroom, and he could see through the angle of the bedroom's doorway the lights from the high-definition screen blink and shift from one primary color to another in the dim room. And for a while he killed time casually by trying to imagine what entertaining scenes on the unwatched viewer the changing colors and intensities might signify. The chair faced the room instead of the window. Reading while waiting for marijuana was out of the question. He considered masturbating, but did not. He didn't reject the idea so much as not react to it and watch as it floated away. He thought very broadly of desires and ideas being watched, but not acted upon. He thought of impulses being starved of expression and drying out and floating dryly away, and felt on some level that this had something to do with him and his circumstances. And what, if this grueling final debauch he committed himself to didn't somehow resolve the problem, would surely have to be called his problem. But he could not even begin to try to see how the image of desiccated impulses floating dryly related to either him or the insect, which had retreated back into its hole in the angled girder, because at this precise time, his telephone and his intercom to the front door's buzzer both sounded at the same time. Both loud and tortured, and so abrupt they sounded yanked through a very small hole into the great balloon of colored silence he sat in, waiting, and he moved first toward the telephone console, then over toward his intercom module, then convulsively back toward the sounding phone, and then tried somehow to move toward both at once, finally, so that he stood splay-legged, arms wildly out as if something's been flung, splayed, entombed between the two sounds, without a thought in his head. The 1st of April, year of the Tux medicated pad. All I know is my dad said to come here. Come right in. You'll see a chair to your immediate left. So, I'm here. That's just fine. 7-Up? Maybe some lemon soda? I guess not, thanks. I'm just here is all. And I'm kind of wondering why my dad sent me down, you know? Your door there doesn't have anything on it, and I was just at the dentist last week, and so I'm wondering why I'm here exactly is all. That's why I'm not sitting down yet. You're how old, Hal? 14? I'll be 11 in June. Are you a dentist? Is this like a dental consult? You're here to converse. Converse? Yes. Pardon me while I key in this age correction. Your father had listed you as 14 for some reason. Converse as in with you? You're here to converse with me, Hal, yes. I'm almost going to have to implore you to have some lemon soda. Your mouth is making those dry, sticky, inadequate saliva sounds. Dr. Zagarelli says that's one reason for all the caries, is that I have low salivary output. Those dry, sticky, salivaless sounds which can be death to a good conversation. But I rode my bike all the way up here against the wind just to converse with you? Is the conversation supposed to start with me asking why? I'll begin by asking if you know the meaning of implore, Hal. Probably. I'll go ahead and take a 7-Up then if you're going to implore. I'll ask you again whether you know implore, young sir. Young sir? You're wearing that bow tie after all. Isn't that rather an invitation to a young sir? Implore's a regular verb, transitive. To call upon, or for, in supplication. To pray to, or for, earnestly. To beseech, to entreat. Weak synonym, urge. Strong synonym, beg. Etymology unmixed. From Latin, implorare. Im, meaning in. Plorare, meaning in this context, to cry aloud. OED, condensed volume 6, page 1387, column 12, and a little bit of 13. Good Lord. She didn't exaggerate, did she? I tend to get beat up sometimes at the academy for stuff like that. Does this bear on why I'm here? That I'm a continentally ranked junior tennis player who can also recite great chunks of the dictionary, verbatim, at will, and tends to get beat up, and wears a bow tie? Are you like a specialist for gifted kids? Does this mean they think I'm gifted? Psst. Here you are, drink up. Thanks. Oh, oh, oh. Yeah. You were thirsty. So then if I sit down, you'll fill me in? Professional conversationalist knows his mucous membranes, after all. I might have to burp a little bit in a second from the soda. I'm alerting you ahead of time. Hal, you are here because I am a professional conversationalist, and your father has made an appointment with me for you to converse. Oh, excuse me. Tap, 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 tap. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Tap, 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 tap. You're a professional conversationalist. I am, yes, as I believe I just stated, a professional conversationalist. Don't start looking at your watch, as if I'm taking up valuable time of yours. If himself made the appointment and paid for it, the time's supposed to be mine, right? Not yours. And then, but what's that supposed to mean? Professional conversationalist. A conversationalist is just one who converses much. You actually charge a fee to converse much? A conversationalist is also one who, I'm sure you'll recall, excels in conversation. That's Webster's 7th. It's not the OED. Tap, tap. I'm an OED man, doctor. If that's what you are. Are you a doctor? Do you have a doctorate? Most people like to put their diplomas up, I notice, if they have credentials. And Webster's 7th isn't even up to date. Webster's 8th amends to one who converses with much enthusiasm. Another 7-up? Is himself still having this hallucination I never speak? Is that why he put the moms up to having me bike up here? Himself is my dad. We call him himself. As in, quote, the man himself. As it were, we call my mother the moms. My brother coined the term. I understand this isn't unusual. I understand most more or less normal families address each other internally by means of pet names and terms and monikers. Don't even think about asking me what my little internal moniker is. Tap, tap, tap. But himself hallucinates sometimes lately. You ought to be apprised, was the thrust. I'm wondering why the moms let him send me pedaling up here, uphill against the wind when I've got a challenge match at 3 to converse with an enthusiast with a blank door and no diplomas anywhere in view. I, in my small way, would like to think it had as much to do with me as with you, that my reputation preceded me. Isn't that usually a pejorative clause? I am wonderful fun to talk to. I'm a consummate professional. People leave my parlor in states. You are here. It's conversation time. Shall we discuss Byzantine erotica? How did you know I was interested in Byzantine erotica? You seem persistently to confuse me with someone who merely hangs out a shingle with the word conversationalist on it, and this operation with a fly-by-night one, strung together with chewing gum and twine. You think I have no support staff? Researchers at my beck? You think we don't delve full-bore into the psyches of those for whom we've made appointments to converse? You don't think this fully accredited, limited partnership would have an interest in obtaining data on what informs and stimulates our conversees? I know only one person who'd ever use full bore in casual conversation. There is nothing casual about a professional conversationalist and staff. We delve. We obtain. And then some, young sir. Okay. Alexandrian or Constantinian? You think we haven't thoroughly researched your own connection with the whole current intra-provincial crisis in southern Quebec? What intra-provincial crisis in southern Quebec? I thought you wanted to talk racy mosaics. This is an upscale district of a vital North American metropolis, Hal. Standards here are upscale and high. A professional conversationalist flat-out full-board delves. Do you for one moment think that a professional plier of the trade of conversation would fail to probe, beak deep into your family's sordid liaison with the Pan-Canadian Resistance's notorious Monsieur Duplessis, and his malevolent but allegedly irresistible amanuensis cum operative, Luria P? Listen, are you okay? Do you? I'm 10 for Pete's sake. I think maybe your appointment calendar squares got juggled. I'm the potentially gifted 10-year-old tennis and lexical prodigy whose mom's a continental mover and shaker in the prescriptive grammar academic world, and whose dad's a towering figure in optical and avant-garde film circles, and single-handedly founded the Enfield Tennis Academy, but drinks wild turkey at like 5 a.m., and pitches over sideways during dawn drills, on the court some days, and some days presents with delusions about people's mouths moving but nothing coming out. I'm not even up to J yet in the condensed OED, much less Quebec or malevolent Lurias. Of the fact that photos of the aforementioned liaison being leaked to Der Spiegel resulted in the bizarre deaths of both an Ottawan paparazzo and a Bavarian international affairs editor, of an alpenstock through the abdomen and an ill-swallowed cocktail onion, respectively. I just finished Jew's ear. I'm just starting on Jew's harp and the general theory of oral liars. I've never even skied. That you could dare to imagine we'd fail conversationally to countenance certain weekly, shall we say, maternal assignations with a certain unnamed bisexual bassoonist in the Albertan Secret Guard's Tactical Bands unit? Gee, is that the exit over there I see? That your blithe inattention to your own dear grammatical mother's cavortings with not one, not two, but over 30 Near Eastern medical attachés? Would it be rude to tell you your mustache is askew? That her introduction of esoteric mnemonic steroids, stereochemically not dissimilar to your father's own daily hypodermic megavitamin supplement, derived from a certain organic testosterone regeneration compound, distilled by the Hevero shaman of the south-central L.A. basin into your innocent-looking bowl of morning Ralston. As a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and tell you your whole face is kind of running, sort of. If you want to check, your nose is pointing at your lap. That your quote-unquote complimentary Dunlop wide-body tennis rackets, super-secret formulaic composition materials of high modulus, graphite-reinforced, polycarbonate, polybutylene resin, are organochemically identical, I say again, identical, to the gyroscopic balance sensor and the mise-en-scène appropriation card and priapistic entertainment cartridge implanted in your very own towering father's anaplastic cerebrum after his cruel series of detoxifications and convolution smoothings and gastrectomy and prostatectomy and pancreatectomy and phalectomy? Tap, tap. Could possibly escape the combined investigation attention of... And it strikes me I've definitely seen that Argyle sweater vest before. That's himself's special Interdependence Day celebratory dinner Argyle sweater vest that he makes a point of never having cleaned. I know those stains. I was there for that clot of veal marsala right there. Is this whole appointment a date-connected thing? Is this April Fool's Dad? Or do I need to call the moms and CT? It requires only daily evidence that you speak, that you recognize the occasional vista beyond your own generous mondragonoid nose's fleshy tip. You rented a whole office and face for this, but leave your old unmistakable sweater vest on? And how'd you even get down here before me, with the mercury up on blocks after you... Did you fool CT into giving you the keys to a functional car? Who used to pray daily for the day his own dear late father would sit, cough, open that bloody tissue of the Tucson Citizen, and not turn that newspaper into the room's fifth wall, and who, after all this light and noise, has apparently spawned the same silence? Who's lived his whole ruddy, bloody, cruddy life in five-walled rooms? Dad, I've got a duly scheduled challenge match with Shocked in 12 minutes. Wind at my back downhill or no. I've got this oral lyrologist who's going to be outside Brighton Best Savings wearing a pre-designated necktie at straight up 5. I have to mow his lawn for a month for this interview. I can't just sit here watching you think I'm mute while your fake nose points at the floor. And are you hearing me talking, Dad? It speaks. It accepts soda. And defines implore and converses with you. Praying for just one conversation, amateur or no, that does not end in terror. That does not end like all the others. You staring, me swallowing. Son. Son! The 9th of May, year of the Depend Adult Undergarment. Another way fathers impact sons is that sons, once their voices have changed in puberty, invariably answer the telephone with the same locutions and intonations as their fathers. This holds true regardless of whether the fathers are still alive. Because he left his dormitory room before 0600 for dawn drills, and often didn't get back there until after supper, packing his book bag and knapsack and gear bag for the whole day, together with selecting his best-strung rackets, it all took Hal some time. Plus, he usually collected and packed and selected in the dark, and with stealth, because his brother Mario was usually still asleep in the other bed. Mario didn't drill, and couldn't play, and needed all the sleep he could get. Hal held his complimentary gear bag and was putting different pairs of sweats to his face, trying to find the cleanest pair by smell, when the telephone console sounded. Mario thrashed and sat up in bed, a small, hunched shape with a big head against the gray light of the window. Hal got to the console on the second ring and had the transparent phone's antenna out by the third. His way of answering the phone sounded like, "Hello?" "I want to tell you," the voice on the phone said. "My head is filled with things to say." Hal held 3 pairs of ETA sweatpants in the hand that didn't hold the phone. He saw his older brother succumb to gravity and fall back limp against the pillows. Mario often sat up and fell back, still asleep. "I don't mind," Hal said softly. "I could wait forever." "That's what you think," the voice said. The connection was cut. It had been Orrin. "Hey, Hal." The light in the room was a creepy gray, a kind of non-light. Hal could hear Brant laughing at something Kenkel had said, off down the hall, on the clank of their janitorial buckets. The person on the phone had been O. "Hey, Hal." Mario was awake. It took 4 pillows to support Mario's oversized skull. His voice came from the tangled bedding. "Is it still dark out, or is it me?" "Go back to sleep. It isn't even 6. Hal put the good leg into the sweatpants first. "Who was it?" Shoving 3 coverless Dunlop wide bodies into the gear bag and zipping the bag partway up so the handles had room to stick out. Carrying all 3 bags back over to the console to deactivate the ringer on the phone, he said, "No one you know, I don't think." Year of the Depend Adult Undergarment. Though only 1/2 ethnic Arab, and a Canadian by birth and residence, the medical attaché is nevertheless once again under Saudi diplomatic immunity, this time as special ear-nose-throat consultant to the personal physician of Prince Q, the Saudi Minister of Home Entertainment, here on northeastern USA soil with his legation to cut another mammoth deal with Interlace Tel Entertainment. The medical attaché turns 37 tomorrow, Thursday, the 2nd of April, in the North American lunar YDAU, Year of the Depend Adult Undergarment. The legation finds the promotional subsidy of the North American calendar hilariously vulgar. To say nothing of the arresting image of the idolatrous West's most famous and self-congratulating idol, the colossal libertine statue, wearing some type of enormous adult-design diaper, an hilariously apposite image popular in the news photos of so many international journals. The attaché's medical practice being normally divided between Montreal and the Rub al Khali, it is his first trip back to USA soil since completing his residency 8 years ago. His duties here involve migrating with the prince and his retinue between Interlace's 2 hubs of manufacture and dissemination in Phoenix, Arizona, USA, and Boston, Massachusetts, USA, respectively, offering expert ENT assistance to the personal physician of Prince Q. The medical attaché's particular expertise is the maxillofacial consequences of imbalances in intestinal flora. Prince Q, as would anyone who refuses to eat pretty much anything but Toblerone, suffers chronically from Candida albicans, with attendant susceptibilities to manilial sinusitis and thrush, the yeasty sores and sinal impactions of which require almost daily drainage in the cold and damp of early spring Boston, USA. A veritable artist, possessed of a deftness nonpareil, with cotton swab and evacuation hypo, the medical attaché is known among the shrinking upper classes of petro-Arab nations as the Debeki of maxillofacial yeast. His staggering fee scale is wholly ad valorem. Saudi consulting fees in particular are somewhere just past obscene, but the medical attaché's duties on this trip are personally draining and sort of nauseous, and when he arrives back at the sumptuous apartments he had his wife sublet in districts far from the legation's normal Back Bay and Scottsdale digs, at the day's end, he needs unwinding in the very worst way. A more than averagely devout follower of the North American Sufism, promulgated in his childhood by Pir Valayat, the medical attaché partakes of neither kif nor distilled spirits, and must unwind without chemical aid. When he arrives home after evening prayers, he wants to look upon a spicy and 100% Sharia halal dinner, piping hot and arranged and steaming pleasantly on its attractive tray. He wants his bib ironed and laid out by the tray at the ready. And he wants the living room's teleputer booted and warmed up, and the evening's entertainment cartridges already selected and arranged and lined up in dock, ready for remote insertion into the viewer's drive. He reclines before the viewer in his special electronic recliner, and his black-veiled, ethnically Arab wife wordlessly attends him, loosening any constrictive clothing, adjusting the room's lighting, fitting the complexly molded dinner tray over his head so that his shoulders support the tray and allow it to project into space just below his chin, that he may enjoy his hot dinner without having to remove his eyes from whatever entertainment is up and playing. He has a narrow imperial-style beard, which his wife also attends, and keeps free of detritus from the tray just below.
Detritus.
The medical attaché sits and watches and eats and watches, unwinding by visible degrees, until the angles of his body in the chair and his head on his neck indicate that he has passed into sleep, at which point his special electronic recliner can be made automatically to recline to full horizontal, and luxuriant silk analog bedding emerges, flowing from long slots in the appliance's sides. And, unless his wife is inconsiderate and clumsy with the recliner's remote handheld controls, the medical attaché is permitted to ease effortlessly from unwound spectation into a fully relaxed night's sleep. Still right there in the recumbent recliner, the TP set to run a recursive loop of low-volume surf and light rain on broad green leaves. Except, that is, for Wednesday nights, which in Boston are permitted to be his wife's Arab Women's Advanced League tennis night with the other legation wives and companions at the plush Mount Auburn Club in West Watertown, on which nights she is not around wordlessly to attend him, since Wednesday is the USA weekday on which fresh Toblerone hits Boston, Massachusetts, USA's Newbury Street's import confectioner's shelves, and the Saudi Minister of Home Entertainment's inability to control his appetites for Wednesday, Toblerone, often requires the medical attaché to remain in personal attendance all evening, on the bulk-rented 14th floor of the Back Bay Hilton, juggling tongue depressors and cotton swabs, Nistadin and ibuprofen and styptics and antibiotic thrush salves, rehabilitating the mucous membranes of the dyspeptic and distressed, and often but not always penitent and appreciative Saudi Prince Q. So, on the 1st of April, YDAU, when the medical attaché is, it is alleged, insufficiently deft with a Q-tip on an ulcerated sinal necrosis, and is subjected at just 1800 hours to a fit of febrile thrush of pique from the florally imbalanced Minister of Home Entertainment, and is by high-volume fiat replaced at the royal bedside by the prince's personal physician, who's summoned by beeper from the Hilton sauna, and when the damp personal physician pats the medical attaché on the shoulder and tells him to pay the pique no mind, that it's just the yeast talking, but to just head on home and unwind and, for once, make a well-deserved early Wednesday evening of it. But so when the attaché does get home, at like 1840 hours, his spacious Boston apartments are empty. The living room lights undimmed, dinner unheated, and the attachable tray still in the dishwasher, and worst, of course no entertainment cartridges have been obtained from the Boylston Street Interlace outlet, where the medical attaché's wife, like all the veiled wives and companions of the prince's legatees, has a complimentary goodwill account. And even if he weren't far too exhausted and tightly wound to venture back into the damp urban night to pick up entertainment cartridges, the medical attaché realizes that his wife has, as always on Wednesdays, taken the car with the diplomatic immunity license plates, without which your thinking alien wouldn't even dream of trying to park publicly at night in Boston, Massachusetts, USA. The medical attaché's unwinding options are thus severely constricted. The living room's lavish TP receives also the spontaneous disseminations of the Interlace subscription pulse matrix. But the procedures for ordering specific spontaneous pulses from the service are so technologically and cryptographically complex that the attaché has always left the whole business to his wife. On this Wednesday night, trying buttons and abbreviations almost at random, the attaché is able to summon up only live USA professional sports, which he has always found brutish and repellent, Texaco Oil Company sponsored opera, which the attaché has seen today more than enough of the human uvula, thank you very much, a redisseminated episode of the popular afternoon interlaced children's program Mr. Bouncity Bounce, which the attaché thinks for a moment might be a documentary on bipolar mood disorders, until he catches on and thumbs the selection panel hastily, and a redisseminated session of the scantily clad variable impact early AM Fit Forever home aerobics series of the Interlace aerobics guru Ms. Tawny Kondo, the scantily clad and splay-limbed immodesty of which threatens the devout medical attaché with the possibility of impure thoughts. The only entertainment cartridges anywhere in the apartment, a foul-tempered search reveals, are those which have arrived in Wednesday's USA postal delivery, left on the sideboard in the living room, along with personal and professional faxes, and mail the medical attaché declines to read, until it's been pre-scanned by his wife for relevant interest to himself. The sideboard is against the wall opposite the room's electronic recliner under a triptych of high-quality Byzantine erotica. The padded cartridge mailers, with their distinctive rectangular bulge, are mixed haphazardly in with the less entertaining mail. Searching for something to unwind with, the medical attaché tears the different padded mailers open along their designated perforations. There is an ONANMA specialty service film on actinomycete-class antibiotics and irritable bowel syndrome. There is the April 1st YDAU's CBC Pate North American News Summary 40-minute cartridge, available daily by a wife's auto-subscription, and either transmitted to TP by unrecordable interlace pulse or express posted on a single-play ROM self-erasing disc. There is the Arabic language video edition of April's Self magazine for the attaché's wife. Nas's covers model chastely swathed and veiled. There is a plain brown and irritatingly untitled cartridge case in a featureless white 3-day standard USA first-class padded cartridge mailer. The padded mailer is postmarked Suburban Phoenix area in Arizona, USA, and the return address box has only the term Happy Anniversary, with a small, drawn, crude face smiling in ballpoint ink, instead of a return address or incorporated logo. Though by birth and residence a native of Quebec, where the language of discourse is not English, the medical attaché knows quite well that the English word anniversary does not mean the same as birthday. And the medical attaché and his veiled wife were united in the eyes of God and prophet not in April, but in October, 4 years prior, in the Rue Balkali. Adding to the padded mailer's confusion is the fact that anything from Prince Q's legation in Phoenix, Arizona, USA, would carry a diplomatic seal instead of routine ONAN postage. The medical attaché, in sum, feels tightly wound and badly underappreciated and is prepared in advance to be irritated by the item inside, which is merely a standard black entertainment cartridge, but is wholly unlabeled and not in any sort of colorful or informative or inviting cartridge case, and has only another of these vapid USA type circular smiling heads embossed upon it where the registration and duration codes are supposed to be embossed. The medical attaché is puzzled by the cryptic mailer and face and case and unlabeled entertainment, and preliminarily irritated by the amount of time he's had to spend upright at the sideboard attending to mail, which is not his task. The sole reason he does not throw the unlabeled cartridge in the waste can or put it aside for his wife to preview for relevance is because there are such woefully slim entertainment pickings on his wife's irritating, Americanized tennis league evening away from her place at home. The attaché will pop the cartridge in and scan just enough of its contents to determine whether it is irritating or of an irrelevant nature and not entertaining or engaging in any way. He will heat the prepared halal lamb and spicy halal garnish in the microwave oven until piping hot, arrange it attractively on his tray, preview the first few moments of the puzzling and or irritating or possibly mysteriously blank entertainment cartridge first, then unwind with the news summary. Then perhaps have a quick, unlibidinous look at Nas's spring line of sexless black devout women's wear. Then we'll insert the recursive Surf and Rain cartridge and make a well-deserved early Wednesday evening of it, hoping only that his wife will not return from her tennis league in her perspiration-dampened black ankle-length tennis ensemble and remove his dinner tray from his sleeping neck in a clumsy or undeft fashion that will awaken him, potentially. When he settles in with the tray and cartridge, the TP's viewer's digital display reads 1927 hours. Year of the trial-size Dove Bar. Wardine say her mama ain't treat her right. Reginald he come round to my blacktop at my building where me and Dolores Epps jump double dutch, and he say, "Clinette, Wardine be down in my crib, cry say her mama ain't treat her right." And I go on with Reginald to his building where he live at, and Wardine be sit deep far back in a closet in Reginald crib, and she be cry. Reginald gonna lift Wardine out the closet, and me with him crying, and I be rub on the wet all over Wardine's face. And Reginald be so careful when he take off all her shirts she got on. Tell Wardine to let me see. Wardine back all beat up and cut up. Big stripes of cut all up and down Wardine back. Pink stripes, and around the stripes of skin like the skin on folks' lips be like. Sick down in my insides to look at it. Wardine be cry. Reginald say Wardine say her mama ain't treat her right. Say her mama beat Wardine with a hanger. Say Wardine mama, man, Roy Tony, be want to lie down with Wardine. Be give Wardine candy and fives. Be standing her way in Wardine face, and he ain't let her pass without he all the time touching her. Reginald say Wardine say Roy Tony at night when Wardine mama at work. He come into the mattresses where Wardine and William and Chantel and Roy the baby sleep at, and he stand there in the dark, high, and say quiet things at her, and breathe. Wardine mama say Wardine tempt Roy Tony into sin. Wardine say, she say Wardine try to take away Roy Tony into evil and sin with her young tight self. She beat Wardine back with hangers out the closet. My mama say Wardine mama not right in her head. My mama scared of Roy Tony. Wardine be cry. Reginald he down and beg for Wardine to tell Reginald mama how Wardine mama treat Wardine. Reginald say he love his Wardine. Say he love but ain't never before this time could understand why Wardine won't lie down with him like girls do their man. Say Wardine ain't never let Reginald take off her shirts until tonight. She come to Reginald crib in his building and be cry, and she let Reginald take off her shirts to see how Wardine mama beat Wardine because Roy Tony. Reginald love his Wardine. Wardine be like to die scared. She say no to Reginald beg. She say if she go to Reginald mama, then Reginald mama go to Wardine mama, then Wardine mama think Wardine be lie down with Reginald. Wardine say her mama say Wardine let a man lie down before she's 16 and she beat Wardine to death. Reginald say he ain't no way gonna let that happen to Wardine. Roy Tony killed Dolores Epps' brother, Columbus Epps, at the Brighton Projects 4 years gone. Roy Tony on parole. Wardine say he show Wardine he got something on his ankle, sent radio signals to parole that he's still here in Brighton. Roy Tony can't be leave Brighton. Roy Tony brother be Wardine father. He gone. Reginald try to hush Wardine, but he cannot stop Wardine cry. Wardine look like crazy, she so scared. She say she kill herself if me or Reginald tell our mamas. She say, Clynette, you my half-sister. I am beg you that you do not tell your mama or my mama and Roy Tony. Reginald tell Wardine to hush herself and lie down quiet. He put shed spread out the kitchen on Wardine cuts on her back. He run his finger with grease so careful down pink lines of her getting beat with her hanger. Wardine say she do not feel nothing on her back ever since spring. She lies stomach on Reginald floor and say she ain't got no feeling in her skin of her back. When Reginald gone to get the water, she asked me the truth. How bad does her back look when Reginald look at it? Is she still pretty? She cry. I ain't tell my mama on Wardine and Reginald and Wardine mama and Roy Tony. My mama scared of Roy Tony. My mama be the lady Roy Tony killed Columbus Epps over 4 years gone in the Brighton Projects for love. But I know Reginald tell. Reginald say he gonna die before Wardine mama beat Wardine again. He say he take himself up to Roy Tony and say him not to mess with Wardine or breathe by her mattress at night. She say he take herself on down to the playground at the Brighton Projects where Roy Tony do business. And he go to Roy Tony man to man and he make Roy Tony make it all right. But I think Roy Tony gonna kill Reginald if Reginald go. I think Roy Tony gonna kill Reginald. And then Wardine mama beat Wardine to death with a hanger. And then nobody knows except me. And I'm gonna have a child. In the 8th American educational grade, Bruce Green fell dreadfully in love with a classmate who had the unlikely name of Mildred Bonk. The name was unlikely because if ever an 8th grader looked like a Daphne Christensen or a Kimberly St. Simone or something like that, it was Mildred Bonk. She was the kind of fatally pretty and nubile wraith-like figure who glides through the sweaty junior high corridors of every nocturnal emitter's dreamscape. Hair that Green had heard described by an overwrought teacher as flaxen, a body which the fickle angel of puberty, the same angel who didn't even seem to know Bruce Green's zip code, had visited, kissed, and already left, back in 6th. Legs which not even orange keds with purple glitter-encrusted laces could make unserious. Shy, iridescent, coltish, pelvically infractious, amply busted, given to diffident movements of hand brushing flaxen hair from front of dear creamy forehead, movements which drove Bruce Green up a private tree. A vision in a sundress and silly shoes. Mildred L. Bonk. And then, but by 10th grade, in one of those queer when-did-that-happen metamorphoses, Mildred Bonk had become an imposing member of the frightening Winchester High School set that smoked full-strength Marlboros in the alley between senior and junior halls, and that left school altogether at lunchtime, driving away in loud, low-slung cars to drink beer and smoke dope, driving around with sound systems of illegal wattage, using Visine and chlorets, etc. She was one of them. She chewed gum, or worse, in the cafeteria. Her dear diffident face now a bored mask of attitude. Her flaxen locks now teased and gelled into what looked, for all the world, like the consequence of a finger stuck into an electric socket. Bruce Green saved up for a low-slung old car and practiced attitude on the aunt who'd taken him in. He developed a will. And by the year of what would have been graduation, Bruce Green was way more bored, imposing, and frightening than even Mildred Bonk. And he and Mildred Bonk and tiny, incontinent Harriet Bonk Green lived just off the Alston Spur in a shiny house trailer with another frightening couple, and with Tommy Ducey, the infamous, hair-lipped, pot and sundries dealer, who kept several large snakes in unclean, uncovered aquaria, which smelled, which Tommy Ducey didn't notice because his upper lip completely covered his nostrils, and all he could smell was lip. Mildred Bonk got high in the afternoon and watched cereal cartridges, and Bruce Green had a steady job at Leisure Time Ice, and for a while, life was more or less one big party. Year of the Depend Adult Undergarment. Hal? Hey, Hal. Yes, Mario? Are you asleep? Boo-boo, we've been over this. I can't be asleep if we're talking. That's what I thought. Happy to reassure you. Boy, were you on today. Boy, did you ever make that guy look sick. When he hit that one down the line and you got it and fell down and hit that drop volley, Pemulus said the guy looked like he was going to be sick all over the net, he said. Boo, I kicked that kid's ass is all. End of story. I don't think it's good to rehash it when I've kicked somebody's ass. It's like a dignity thing. I think we should just let it sort of lie in state, quietly. Speaking of which... Hey, Hal? Hey, Hal? It's late, Mario. It's sleepy time. Close your eyes and think fuzzy thoughts. That's what the moms always says, too. Always worked for me, Boo. You think I think fuzzy thoughts all the time. You let me room with you because you feel sorry for me. Boo-boo, I'm not even going to dignify that. I'll regard it as, like, a warning sign. You always get petulant when you don't get enough sleep. And here we are seeing petulance already on the western horizon, right here. When I asked if you were asleep, I was going to ask if you felt like you believed in God today out there, when you were so on, making that guy look sick. This again? Really don't think midnight in a totally dark room, with me so tired my hair hurts, and drills in 6 short hours, is the time and place to get into this, Mario. You ask me this once a week. You never say is why. So tonight, to shush you, how about if I say, I have administrative bones to pick with God, Boo? I'll say God seems to have a kind of laid-back management style I'm not crazy about. I'm pretty much anti-death. God looks, by all accounts, to be pro-death. I'm not seeing how we can get together on this issue, he and I, Boo. You're talking about since himself passed away. See? You never say. I do too say. I just did. I just didn't happen to say what you wanted to hear, Boo-boo, is all. There's a difference. I don't get how you couldn't feel like you believed today out there. It was so right there. You moved like you totally believed. How do you feel inside not? Mario, you and I are mysterious to each other. We countenance each other from either side of some unbridgeable difference on this issue. Let's lie very quietly and ponder this. Hal? Hey, Hal. I'm going to propose that I tell you a joke, Boo, on the condition that afterward you shush and let me sleep. Is it a good one? Mario, what do you get when you cross an insomniac, an unwilling agnostic, and a dyslexic? I give. You get somebody who stays up all night torturing himself mentally over the question of whether or not there's a dog. Huh. That's a good one. Shush. Hey, Hal, what's an insomniac? Somebody who rooms with you, kid, that's for sure. Hey, Hal, how come the moms never cried when himself passed away? I cried, and you, even CT cried. I saw him personally cry. You listened to Tosco over and over and cried and said you were sad. We all were. Hey, Hal, did the mom seem like she got happier after himself passed away to you? It seems like she got happier. She seems even taller. She stopped traveling everywhere all the time for this and that thing, the corporate grammar thing, the library protest thing. Now she never goes anywhere, Boo. Now she's got the headmaster's house and her office and the tunnel in between and never leaves the grounds. She's a worse workaholic than she ever was, and more obsessive-compulsive. When's the last time you saw a dust mote in that house? Hey, Hal? Now she's just an agoraphobic workaholic and obsessive-compulsive. This strikes you as hapification? Her eyes are better. They don't seem as sunk in. They look better. She laughs at CT way more than she laughed at himself. She laughs from lower down inside. She laughs more. Her jokes she tells are better ones than yours even now, a lot of the time. How come she never got sad? She did get sad, Boo-Boo. She just got sad in her way instead of yours and mine. She got sad, I'm pretty sure. Hal, you remember how the staff lowered the flag to half-mast out in front of the portcullis here after it happened? Do you remember that? And it goes to half-mast every year at convocation? Remember the flag, Boo? Hey, Hal, don't cry, Boo-Boo. Remember the flag only halfway up the pole? Boo-Boo, there are 2 ways to lower a flag to half-mast. Are you listening? Because no shit, I really have to sleep here in a second, so listen. One way to lower the flag to half-mast is just to lower the flag. There's another way, though. You can also just raise the pole. You can raise the pole to like twice its original height. You get me? You understand what I mean, Mario? Hal? She's plenty sad, I bet. At 20:10 hours, on the 1st of April, YDAU, the medical attaché is still watching the unlabeled entertainment cartridge. October, year of the Depend adult undergarment. For Orin Incandenza, number 71, morning is the soul's night, the day's worst time psychically. He cranks the condo's AC way down at night and still most mornings wakes up soaked, fetally curled, entombed in that kind of psychic darkness where you're dreading whatever you think of. Hal Incandenza's brother Orin wakes up alone at 0730 hours amid a damp scent of ambush, and on the other side's dented pillow a note with a phone number and vital data in a loopy schoolgirlish hand. There's also ambush on the note. His side of the bed is soaked. Orin makes honey toast, standing barefoot at the kitchen counter wearing briefs and an old academy sweatshirt with the arms cut off, squeezing honey from the head of a plastic bear. The floor so cold it hurts his feet, but the double-pane window over the sink is hot to the touch. The beastly Metro Phoenix October AM heat just outside. Home with the team, no matter how high the AC or how thin the sheet, Orin wakes with his own impressions sweated darkly into the bed beneath him, slowly drying all day to a white, salty outline, just slightly off from the week's other, faint, dried outlines. So his fetal-shaped, fossilized image is fanned out across his side of the bed like a deck of cards, just overlapping, like an acid trail or timed exposure. The heat just past the glass doors tightens his scalp. He takes breakfast out to a white iron table by the condo complex's central pool and tries to eat it there, in the heat, the coffee not steaming or cooling. He sits there in dumb, animal pain. He has a mustache of sweat. A bright beach ball floats and bumps against one side of the pool. The sun, like a sneaky keyhole view of hell. No one else out here. The complex is a ring with a pool and deck and jacuzzi in the center. Heat shimmers off the deck like fumes from fuel. There's that mirage thing where the extreme heat makes the dry deck look wet with fuel. Orin can hear cartridge viewers going from behind closed windows. That aerobics show every morning, and also someone playing an organ, and the older woman who won't ever smile back at him in the apartment next to his doing operatic scales, muffled by drapes and sun curtains and double panes. The jacuzzi chugs and foams. The note from last night's subject is on violet bond, once folded, and with a circle of darker violet dead center where the subject's perfume spritzer had hit it. The only interesting thing about the script, but also depressing, is that every single circle, O's, D's, P's, and numbers 6 and 8, is darkened in, while the I's are dotted not with circles, but with tiny little Valentine hearts, which are not darkened in. Orin reads the note while he eats toast. That's mainly an excuse for the honey. He uses his smaller right arm to eat and drink. His oversized left arm and big left leg remain at rest at all times in the morning. A breeze sends the beach ball skating all the way across the blue pool to the other side, and Orin watches its noiseless glide. The white iron tables have no umbrellas, and you can tell where the sun is without looking. You can feel right where it is on your body and project from there. The ball moves tentatively back out toward the middle of the pool and then stays there, not even bobbing. The same small breezes make the rotted palms along the condominium complex's stone walls rustle and click, and a couple of fronds detach and spiral down, hitting the deck with a slap. All the plants out here are malevolent, heavy, and sharp. The parts of the palms above the fronds are tufted in sick stuff like coconut hair. Roaches and other things live in the trees. Rats, maybe. Loathsome high-altitude critters of all kinds. All the plants either spiny or meaty. Cacti in queer, tortured shapes. The tops of the palms like Rod Stewart's hair from days gone by. Orin returned with the team from the Chicago game 2 nights ago, red-eye. He knows that he and the place kicker are the only 2 starters who are not still in terrible pain, physically, from the beating. The day before they left, so like 5 days ago, Orin was out by himself in the jacuzzi by the pool late in the day, caring for the leg, sitting in the radiant heat and bloody late-day light with the leg in the jacuzzi, absently squeezing the tennis ball he still absently squeezes out of habit, watching the jacuzzi funnel and bubble and foam around the leg. And out of nowhere a bird had all of a sudden fallen into the jacuzzi, with a flat, matter-of-fact plop, out of nowhere, out of the wide, empty sky. Nothing overhung the jacuzzi but sky. The bird seemed to have just had a coronary or something in flight and died and fallen out of the empty sky and landed dead in the jacuzzi, right by the leg. He brought his sunglasses down onto the bridge of his nose with a finger and looked at it. It was an undistinguished kind of bird, not a predator, like a wren, maybe. It seems like no way could it have been a good sign. The dead bird bobbed and barrel rolled in the foam, sucked under 1 second and reappearing the next, creating an illusion of continued flight. Orin had inherited none of the mom's phobias about disorder, hygiene. Not crazy about bugs, though. Roaches. But he just sat there squeezing the ball, looking at the bird without a conscious thought in his head. By the next morning, waking up, curled and entombed, it seemed like it had to have been a bad sign, though. Orin now always gets the shower so hot it's to where he can just barely stand it. The condo's whole bathroom is done in this kind of minty yellow tile he didn't choose, maybe chosen by the free safety who lived here before the Cardinals sent New Orleans the free safety, 2 reserve guards, and cash for Orin Incandenza, punter. And no matter how many times he has the Terminex people out, there are still the enormous roaches that come out of the bathroom drains. Sewer roaches, according to Terminex. Blattaria implacabilis or something. Really huge, roaches. Armored vehicle-type bugs. Totally black with Kevlar-type cases, the works. And fearless, raised in the Hobbesian sewers down there. Boston's and New Orleans' little brown roaches were bad enough, but you could at least come in and turn on the light and they'd run for their lives. These Southwest sewer roaches, you turn on the light, and they just look up at you from the tile like, "You got a problem?" Orrin stomped on one of them, only once, that had come up hellishly out of the drain in the shower when he was in there, showering, going out naked and putting shoes on and coming in and trying to conventionally squash it, and the result was explosive. There's still material from that one time in the tile grouting. It seems unremovable. Roach innards. Sickening. Throwing the shoes away is preferable to looking at the sole to clean it. Now, he keeps big glass tumblers in the bathroom, and when he turns on the light and sees a roach, he puts a glass down over it, trapping it. After a couple of days, the glass is all steamed up and the roach has asphyxiated messlessly, and Orrin discards both the roach and the tumbler in separate sealed Ziplocs in the dumpster complex by the golf course up the street. The yellow tile floor of the bathroom is sometimes a little obstacle course of glasses with huge roaches dying inside, stoically, just sitting there, the glasses gradually steaming up with roach dioxide. The whole thing makes Orrin sick. Now he figures the hotter the shower's water, the less chance any small armored vehicle is going to feel like coming out of the drain while he's in there. Sometimes they're in the bowl of the toilet first thing in the a.m., dog paddling, trying to get to the side and climb up. He's also not crazy about spiders, though more like unconsciously. He's never come any place close to the conscious horror himself had somehow developed about the Southwest's black widows and their chaotic webs. The widows are all over the place, both here and Tucson. Spottable on all but the coldest nights, their dusty webs without any kind of pattern, plotting just about any right-angled place that's dim or out of the way. Terminex's toxins are more effective on the widows. Orrin has them out monthly. He's on like a subscription plan over at Terminex. Orrin's special conscious horror, besides heights and the early morning, is roaches. There'd been parts of Metro Boston near the bay he'd refused to go to as a child. Roaches give him the howling fantods. The parishes around N.O. had been having a spate or outbreak of a certain Latin origin breed of sinister tropical flying roaches that were small and timid but could fucking fly. And that kept being found swarming on New Orleans infants at night, in their cribs, especially infants in, like, tenements or squalor, and that reportedly fed on the mucus in the baby's eyes, some special sort of optical mucus, the stuff of fucking nightmares. Mobile flying roaches that wanted to get at your eyes as an infant and were reportedly blinding them. Parents had come in the ghastly AM tenement light and find their infants blind. Like a dozen blinded infants that last summer. And it was during this spate or nightmarish outbreak, plus July flooding that sent over a dozen nightmarish dead bodies from a hilltop graveyard, sliding all gray-blue down the incline, Orrin and two teammates had their townhouse on, in suburban Chalmette, shedding limbs and innards all the way down the hillside's mud, and one even one morning coming to rest against the post of their roadside mailbox when Orrin came out for the morning paper, that Orrin had had his agent put out the trade feelers. And so, to the glass canyons and merciless light of Metro Phoenix, in a kind of desiccated circle, near the Tucson of his own father's desiccated youth. It's the mornings after the spider and heights dreams that are the most painful, that it takes sometimes 3 coffees and 2 showers and sometimes a run to loosen the grip on his soul's throat. And these post-dream mornings are even worse if he wakes up unalone, if the previous night's subject is still there, wanting to twitter or to cuddle and like spoon, asking what exactly is the story with the foggy inverted tumblers on the bathroom floor, commenting on his night sweats, clattering around in the kitchen, making kippers or bacon or something even more hideous, and unhoneyed he's supposed to eat with postcoital male gusto. The ones who have this thing about, they call it, feeding my man, wanting a man who can barely keep down AM honey toast to eat with male gusto, elbows out and shoveling, making little noises. Even when alone, able to uncurl alone and sit up slowly and wring out the sheet and go to the bathroom, these darkest mornings start days that Orrin can't even bring himself for hours to think about how he'll get through the day. These worst mornings with cold floors and hot windows and merciless light. The soul's certainty that the day will have to be not traversed but sort of climbed vertically, and then that going to sleep again at the end of it will be like falling again off something tall and sheer. So now his own eye mucus is secure in the desert southwest, but the bad dreams have gotten worse since the trade to this blasted area himself had fled, long ago as an unhappy youngster. As a nod to Orrin's own unhappy youth, all the dreams seemed to open briefly with some sort of competitive tennis situation. Last night's had started with a wide-angle shot of Orrin on a hard-true court, waiting to receive serve from someone vague, some academy person. Ross Reet, maybe, or good old M. Bain, or gray-toothed Walt Fletchett, now a teaching pro in the Carolinas. When the dream's screen tightens on him and abruptly dissolves to the blank dark rose color of eyes closed against bright light, and there's the ghastly feeling of being submerged and not knowing which way to head for the surface and air, and after some interval the dreams Orrin struggles up from this kind of visual suffocation to find his mother's head, Mrs. Avril M. T. Incandenza's, the mom's disconnected head, attached face to his own fine head, strapped tight to his face somehow by a wraparound system of VS, high-pro, top-shelf, lamb-gut string from his Academy racket's own face, so that no matter how frantically Orrin tries to move his head or shake it side to side or twist up his face or roll his eyes, he's still staring at, into, and somehow through his mother's face, as if the mom's head was some sort of overtight helmet Orrin can't wrestle his way out of.
2.
In the dream, it's understandably vital to Orrin that he disengage his head from this phylactery-ish bind of his mother's disembodied head, and he cannot. Last night's subject's note indicates that at some point last night, Orrin had clutched her head with both hands and tried to sort of stiff-arm her, though not in an ungentle or complaining way. The note, not the stiff-arm. The apparent amputation of Mom's head from the rest of the Mom's appears in the dream to be clean and surgically neat. There is no evidence of a stump, or any kind of nubbin of neck, even, and it is as if the base of the round, pretty head had been sealed, and also sort of rounded off so that her head is a large living ball, a globe with a face attached to his own head's face. The subject after Bain's sister, but before the one just before this one, with the ambush scent and the hearts over eyes. The previous subject had been a sallowly pretty Arizona State developmental psychology grad student with 2 kids and outrageous alimony and pensions for sharp jewelry, refrigerated chocolate, interlace educational cartridges, and professional athletes who thrashed in their sleep. Not real bright. She thought the figure he'd trace without thinking on her bare flank after sex was the numeral 8, to give you an idea. Their last morning together, right before he'd mailed her child an expensive toy, and then had his phone number changed, he'd awakened from a night of horror show dreams, woke up with an abrupt fetal spasm, unrefreshed and benighted of soul, his eyes wobbling and his wet silhouette on the bottom sheet like a coroner's chalk outline. He woke to find the subject up and sitting up against the reading pillow, wearing his sleeveless Academy sweatshirt and sipping hazelnut espresso and watching, on the cartridge viewing system that occupied half the bedroom's south wall, something horrific called Interlace Educational Cartridges in conjunction with CBC Educational Programming Matrix presents Schizophrenia, Mind or Body. And it had to lie there, moist and paralyzed, curled fetal on his own sweat shadow, and watch on the viewer a pale young guy about Hal's age, with copper stubble and a red cowlick and flat, blank, effectless black doll's eyes, stare into space stage left, while a brisk Albertan voiceover explained that Fenton here was a dyed-in-the-wool paranoid schizophrenic who believed that radioactive fluids were invading his skull and that hugely complex high-tech type machines had been specially designed and programmed to pursue him without cease until they caught him and made brutal sport of him and buried him alive. It was an old, late-millennial CBC public interest Canadian news documentary, digitally sharpened and re-disseminated under the Interlace imprimatur. Interlace could get kind of seedy and low rent during early morning off hours in terms of spontaneous disseminations. And so, but since the old CBC documentary's thesis was turning out pretty clearly to be schizophrenia body, the voiceover evinced great clipped good cheer as it explained that, well, yes, poor old Fenton here was more or less hopeless as an extra-institutional functioning unit, but that, on the upside, science could at least give his existence some sort of meaning by studying him very carefully to help learn how schizophrenia manifested itself in the human body's brain. That, in other words, with the aid of cutting-edge positron emission topography, or PET technology, since supplanted wholly by invasive digitals, Orrin hears the developmental psychology graduate student mutter to herself, watching rapt over her cup, unaware that Orrin's paralytically awake. They could scan and study how different parts of poor old Fenton's dysfunctional brain emitted positrons in a whole different topography than your average hale and hearty, non-delusional, God-fearing Albertan's brain. Advancing science by injecting test subject Fenton here with a special blood-brain barrier penetrating radioactive dye, and then sticking him in the rotating body-sized receptacle of a PET scanner. On the viewer, it's an enormous gray metal machine that looks like something co-designed by James Cameron and Fritz Lang. And now have a look at this Fenton fellow's eyes as he starts to get the gist of what the voiceover is saying. And in a terse old public TV cut, they now showed subject Fenton in 5-point canvas restraints whipping his copper-haired head from side to side as guys in mint green surgical masks and caps inject him with radioactive fluids through a turkey baster-sized syringe. Then, good old Fenton's eyes bugging out in total foreseen horror as he's rolled toward the huge gray PET device and slid like an unrisen loaf into the thing's open maw until only his decay-colored sneakers are in view. And the body-sized receptacle rotates the test subject counterclockwise with brutal speed so that the old sneakers point up and then left and then down and then right and then up, faster and faster. The machine's blurps and tweets not even coming close to covering Fenton's entombed howls as his worst delusional fears came true in digital stereo, and you could hear the last surviving bits of his functional, dye-permeated mind being screamed out of him for all time as the viewer digitally superimposed an image of Fenton's ember-red and neutron-blue brain in the lower right corner, where Interlace's time-temp functions usually appear, and the brisk voiceover gave capsule histories of first paranoid schizophrenia, and then PET. With Orrin lying there, slit-eyed, wet and neuralgic, with AM dread, wishing the subject would put her own clothes and sharp jewelry on and take the rest of her Toblerone out of the freezer and go, so he could go to the bathroom and get yesterday's asphyxiated roaches into an EWD dumpster before the dumpster's all filled for the day, and decide what kind of expensive present to mail the subject's kid. And then, the matter of the dead bird, out of nowhere. And then, news of pressure from the AZ Cardinal administration to cooperate with some sort of insipid-type personality profile series of interviews with some profiler from Moment magazine, with personal, backgroundish questions to be answered in some blandly sincere, team PR way, the unexamined stress of which drives him to start calling Haley again. Reopen that whole Pandora's box of worms. Orrin also shaves in the shower, face red with heat, wreathed in steam, by feel, shaving upward with south to north strokes as he was taught.